I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I would be in full panic, like sobbing. I would go sit in a corner. And I had experiences in my career that were far from okay, that involved other people and substance abuse and different things that I was reliving.
Mm.
And I was like, where the hell is this coming from?
Caroline, thank you so much for coming on to At the End of the Tunnel. It is an honor to have you on and to hear more about your backstory. We've known each other for, I don't know, 6 years or something like this.
Yeah.
I believe we met at the Mind Body Green conference in Arizona. And I don't know, we just kind of had like an affinity for one another. And then I happened to bump into you again a few years ago when I started working out at Deuce Gym in Venice, which is right around the corner from my house. And but at that point, you'd sort of transformed from when I first met you. You were kind of skinny, and then you were like super CrossFitty. You had the quads and the lats. And
I went from
all the things, just like a superhero.
Yeah, I went from wanting to shrink to slowly coming out of this little cocoon that I had been living in. Yeah, when I met you, that was a very challenging time. And I, of course, would have never admitted that. But that conference was so special because I met some incredible people there that saw me for who I was and where I was at. And I remember being, oh my gosh, like I'm not my full self here. Like, I'm not peppy Caroline. I don't even know how to be around people. I just want to run away to my room and sit in silence. So it was nice. Gretchen Bleiler was another one that I really connected with there. Olympic snowboarder, and just being able to meet some people that I've had lifelong friendships with over a span of a quick 48 hours. So that was
Did
fun.
you know Rich Roll at the time, or did you guys meet at one of those conferences as well?
We met, yes. So we actually knew each other through the grapevine. I knew of him through the grapevine of coaches and mentors that I had in swimming. And then when I saw him there, it was like, Rich, oh my gosh, like I'm Caroline. And we both knew Jack Roach, one of our mutual friends. And it was just an instant, like, each other forever. You've known each other for such a long time kind of feeling. But the swimming world is a very small yet large world. So you kind of know who people are and what their impact is and their influence. But you may not really know them until you meet them. And then when you meet them, you feel like you've known them forever. So that was the exact same place too. So it's a lifelong. And Hillary Biscay was another one that I connected with well there. That was like, wait a minute, I feel like we've known each other forever. But
yeah, I met Rich at that same conference as well, and ended up on his podcast as well a couple of years after that.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I remember that.
as you know, because you've heard the podcast before, I like to start the conversations off talking about childhood. So let's take it back to what was it, Barberry Lane in Louisville, Kentucky?
Yes. Good old Louisville, Kentucky.
Talk about your favorite toy or activity that you remember as a young person. So
we grew up in a very active household. Both of my parents were athletes, and looking back, I think of it like, oh man, we had so much fun. And in reality, they're probably like, here's a Barbie Jeep. Here's an Army Jeep. Like, go do something for a couple hours so I can get some stuff done. Now that I'm a dog mom over here, I sort of have that same mindset where I'm like, here, chew this for about 2 hours, figure something out. But they gave us a lot of independence, and it was super special in that way. So we grew up Louisville, Kentucky. It's a bigger town now, small town then, swimmers, little athletes. My brother and I are very close in age and very close. We were outside all the time. Zero time inside. I can hardly remember, maybe a couple, duck hunt and Mario Kart moments, but for the most part, we were outdoor kids running around the neighborhood, playing dodgeball, softball, baseball, whatever, in our little circle. Every kid is out there together, such a community. And that's something I really, I grew up in that. And I grew up in a special world like that, which was very rare. It was more of a sheltered kind of experience, but it was nice because it's like, it's like Huck Finn, right? Like you're out there I've got my stick and my bandana, and, we're running around the neighborhood with our stuff. And those are some of my fondest moments where we're always outside. And I think that really laid the foundation for a lot of my life, because I crave that nature and being in that community, and in that small community, and creating that environment for myself.
Were you a tomboy? Were you playing with boys or girls, or who were you playing with?
For sure a tomboy. But I will have a caveat here. The tomboys that are super sensitive, where you try and act like you can hang, but you really just you just need some moments to feel like you're connecting. To answer your question, 100% would play hard, do all the things, but I did not trend toward that aggressive mentality where I needed to win, or I needed to prove, or that came on a little bit later. But in the beginning, it was a very I just want to be a part of the group. And I just want to be a part of the group. That was my next
question. Yeah. What was your role in your friend circle? Were you I'm down for whatever? Were you the leader? Were you the one that made sure everybody was included?
For sure, the feeler. So making sure everybody was okay. I really enjoyed making sure everybody was okay in my friend circle. I would say I was a leader, but I was also a silent leader. I wasn't extremely, again, that like, guys, this, like, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this, like, let's go. That was never really, at least from my memory. I had friends that were a bit more like that. And I was more go with the flow, but make sure that everyone was okay and that everyone was having a good time. And if somebody wasn't, I vividly remember times where I would run over them. Hey, what's wrong? Are you okay? I felt so deeply. And I think that was also an interesting thing to experience as a young girl, because that grew up in a world with a lot of my brother's friends as well, because we're so close in age, that I never knew how to do anything with that, because especially in the 90s, that's not a thing that is even spoken about. It's like, go hard or go home, be a tough girl, this, finish the job, do this. And I was feeling so deeply. And so I never knew what to do with that. I think it always felt a little bit out of place. And so sometimes I was very sensitive, or maybe get my feelings hurt, and would have to kind of regroup, which I'm very mentally strong with. I could regroup quickly, but I couldn't differentiate between, like, is this sensitivity something good? Like, can I use this? I feel so much. I get tired so quickly from feeling everyone's emotions as a young girl, adults, kids, friends, whatever it is. I felt that. So I think my role was very much a feeler, very much, someone that I felt like I could help people. Yeah. It's funny to think back on that stuff. I have vivid memories, like exactly where I was and what I was doing, and under this big tree in our neighborhood, we had this circle, this cul-de-sac, kind of thing, but it's like a driveway circle we all played in. And it was progressively sinking because it would get wet. We lived in a valley, Louisville's wet and damp, and it was just sinking and muddy, and we would play in that thing all day. And it was like kind of the home base for our neighborhood community, and all the kids would go there. And we had a different person in different shoes, with different roles, like you said. So.
And you said you felt like a bit of a fish out of water as well at school, right? You went to some Catholic school or something like this.
Yeah, I always have kind of mixed memories of this experience in my life, because I grew up in a Catholic grade school, which I'm extremely grateful for, my friends, the community. but I never felt like I fit in. Like I never felt like I fit in all the way through high school. I never knew how to fit in. I think there was a sense of fear surrounding who I was, again, that sensitive person. And also I didn't know how to actually hang with like the cool kids. You know, I didn't like it. I remember being very afraid even of going to adult parties and there'd be adults drinking, you know, and I was like very afraid of that as a little kid. Like I didn't like that because I knew what that meant. It's like I knew something was out of control. And, you know, it can be such a silly thing to say out loud because it's like, yeah, whatever, you know, adults are going to drink. Like, you know, you go to a little neighborhood party, there's adults there with beers in their hand. Same thing with school. I felt like I didn't know how to fit in with the cool kids or with the group of people that were always doing something different. And I was just, okay, wake up, go to swim practice, or, you know, go to school, go to swim practice, come home, introvert. And I was confused about how to do that because I was social. Like people liked me, but I didn't know how to fit in with them. So it was like this self-imposed pain that I was constantly putting on myself. And I think that continued on through my life, but I was so grateful for the experience, but I think I struggled to feel like I fit in. I had this creative mind. I was at a math and science school. There were very strict rules, and I'm like looking at butterflies, not paying attention. That the constant conversation with me was, Caroline, Caroline, come pay attention, you know, over here. We're doing this over here, you know, and I'm looking out the window or I'm doodling on my paper, I'm daydreaming, I'm doing all of these things that we're not, you know, of course they're not like, okay, when you're trying to pay attention in class. So that was something that, yeah, I think that carried through, but there was an interesting dynamic there with trying to fit in.
Mm. And your parents dropped you all off at the pool all day long, right? Like from morning to night to this is the Quarry pool in the local Quarry pool in Kentucky. That's apparently really famous.
It's an incredible pool. Yeah. We have this rocked out quarry that we call the lake. It's called Lakeside. It's not a lake, but it's a quarry. And, you know, the sides of it are all cliffs and ridges and rock. And the bottom of the pool is rock. There's no heater. It was heated by the sun. So it was freezing right when they filled it up every year. And, you know, there's just a cycle of time that they fill it up, and then everyone moves indoors during the winter. But that was like just the Mecca. I mean, if you swam at Lakeside, you were so lucky. And
were there lanes cordoned off, or there's just a big open?
Yeah, there were lanes. One section had 10 lanes. And so they kind of like put some cement in, measured out 50 meters. And that's where I grew up and trained in the summers. So it was a super special time. And that was sort of before there were a lot of other pools. I mean, that was the pool. Now there are several other institutions and pools and clubs. And that was like the thing that it was like, oh, you still know the lake? Whoa, yeah, you're so lucky. I didn't really realize how lucky I was then, but looking back, it was a really special upbringing. You're in nature every day, twice a day in the summer with cliffs and trees. And, you know, it's like this fairy tale looking pool, bright blue, you know, I'll show you pictures. It's really beautiful. Fountain, you know, over in the corner, there's this huge area where everybody gets to play, and there's fountains and diving boards and all this stuff. So I was very lucky.
Growing up with athlete parents, was it a foregone conclusion that you and your brother were you just had to pick whichever sport you wanted to excel at, but you were going to play sports in some form or fashion?
Yeah, I think it was a lead by example kind of situation. I can't recall, you know, we grew up in a pretty, I wouldn't say like strict by any means, but we were very routine oriented. So there was no force, like you have to do this as far as swimming went, or soccer, or tennis, or whatever other sport we played. But the message was, this is good for you. and I'm doing this too. So we're going to go, mom and dad are going to go play tennis, and you guys are going to come and you're going to sit and watch us. Or you're going to come, when we were toddlers and kids, like that was part of our daily life, was just going to do things that were active. So I think because we learned by example, that drive, which both of my parents are very driven, it was just ingrained in us, I think, from a young age, that felt really, really special. And also, it was nonverbal. Like there was no, you have to do this. There was just the expectation that this is something that's healthy for you. This is something that's powerful for you. And that's what I at least remember from the experience. There's obviously so many other layers in society and things I could go deeper into, but from them, that was the message.
And were you a gifted athlete in general, or did you have specific natural talent for swimming? And if so, what does that look like?
Swimming is a very specific sport. So it's interesting because for being a tomboy, I remember playing soccer, and the reason I didn't end up continuing playing soccer is because there was just too much aggression, and my bow would fall out of my hair. So I didn't like that at the time. I had this bow headband thing. And I remember my mom has video, where I'm like fixing my bow in the middle of a game when I should be going to get the ball. It's like right there. And that's my job at that point in time. So I remember, swimming is a very specific sport, in that you're wet, you're cold. There's a lot of dedication that goes into it. You got to wake up early. And I somehow liked that. But I do think paired with that was this natural gift. But swimming was never a sport to me. And this is a brand new awakening that I've had the past couple of years, that the reason why I always felt sort of out of place is because I saw everything as art or creativity. And swimming to me was an art form. It was a way for me to express myself using my body and doing so in a way that was fluid, and doing so in a way that felt natural to me. I had that affinity for the water. The water felt safe, it felt like home. And so because I felt so free in that space, I was able to express myself, which again came a little bit, it was more of a challenge to me in school or in friendship circles, to like talk, express myself through something on land. It just didn't feel the same. And so once I could start to figure that out, I was like, this is for me. Swimming is for me. It was a very fluid art form that I innately knew I had that feeling about. It was hard to explain to anybody. Like I couldn't have articulated that at age 12.
I can imagine. My dad was an attorney, and all he talked about was, you need to be in business for yourself and whatnot. Your mom was a pro tennis player, right? So obviously she excelled to the highest levels of that. When you were a kid, what was your impression of success? And did you see yourself as a child taking swimming to the highest levels? Like, was that one of your goals, just as a side effect of growing up with parents who had done the same thing?
I actually grew up with maybe 2 or 3 role models in swimming, 2 or 3 idols. But the idols that I remember were tennis players. So, we would watch the Williams sisters and Steffi Graf and Andre Agassi and Pete Sampras. And I remember we would go to US Open, and I was very into that, and I liked their outfits and the way they carried themselves. And I remember feeling that from them, but I didn't know the score. I didn't understand what was going on. And so when I think about what my drive was, and thinking about what it was that I was looking to accomplish, even in the sport of swimming, like, why did I want to do it? What was my reason? What was my why? I honestly just wanted to feel the way that they felt. and the way they felt was my perception of the way they felt.
Mm-hmm.
But seeing the joy, seeing the fun, and not really understanding what all went into it and what all was going on, I remember those were the things. And that was what I wanted. And I couldn't have told you I want medals. I couldn't have told you I want to feel famous, or I want to feel successful with accolades and times and money and all these things. You know, I think as I got into my teens, I just wanted to feel the way that they felt. And if somebody asked me what that was, how does Pete Sampras feel? Or how does Venus Williams feel? It's like, well, she's just happy because she gets to pick her outfits, and she gets to show up to, you know, those literally were my answers. And that would frustrate people because they're like, what is your reason here? And so, yeah, I can go on a million different tangents with that, but I think.
When did it occur to you how much work would be involved in getting to that level?
Actually, I don't know what year I was in high school, but maybe a freshman. I was 13,
mm-hmm.
and I made the junior national cut in breaststroke, which was not even what I ended up being, an Olympic athlete. And I was this little 13-year-old. And I walked over to my coach, who, you know, at the time was like a big, scary guy, but so nice. And I loved him so much. And he was like a big dad, you know, big teddy bear. But now looking back, best coach I've ever had in my life. And I said, I'm not ready to go. This is like right after I made it. When you make a cut in swimming, it's just like track, right? You make a cut, or sectionals, or junior nationals, or senior nationals. Track and swimming are like almost the exact same as far as setup. You go to the meet. And I would have been the youngest there from Lakeside, my club team, by like 3 years. Everybody was 16 and older. And I said, I'm not going. I was so adamant. He said, why? I said, I'm not ready. And he looked at me, and I'll never forget this. I was at the University of Kentucky pool, and he looked at me and he goes, all right, it's up to you. You figure out why you're not ready, and we'll talk about it later. And I remember being like, what? You know? Like, that was easy enough, you know, but he was giving me the autonomy to figure out why I wasn't ready and what it was that I needed to do. And there's, you know, swimming's a high pressure sport. Like I don't give myself enough credit sometimes for how much pressure goes into it at a young age. And I'm 13 years old and I'm making this cut that here I am to go to this meet, one of the youngest in the nation to go. And I didn't want to go because I wasn't ready. And he's giving me the autonomy. And I remember in that moment thinking, I'm going to be good. Like, I'm going to be good. And that's terrifying. And it's not that I'm not ready to go physically, because I know I can do it and I know my body's capable of it, but I'm not ready to go because I don't really believe that I can perform at the same level as these other athletes can. So I was putting myself very low on the ability scale compared to the rest of the athletes in the world. So I didn't go. And then that was,
so your parents signed off on this executive decision that you made, or they didn't know that you had this invitation to go to this thing?
Well, I'm sure there were some conversations with them and my coach behind the scenes, but I remember them just saying, okay, well then let's set your sights on the next one and let's figure out how you can get there. So the next one was in Gainesville, Florida, which is where I ended up going to college. I was 15 and I made the next one in freestyle, which is what I would end up doing for the rest of my career. It's what I'd specialize in. I did that in my, you know, in our home pool. And so I remember going to that. Same mentality, to be totally honest, but a step in the right direction that I showed up and got dead last at the meet in my race.
On purpose?
No.
Because I know you told stories about how you would let people beat you sometimes because you would feel bad.
Feel bad. That was definitely a thing for sure. That I was so nervous at that meet. And my nerves came from people pleasing, which is a direct, here we go back to the conversation we just had about childhood, making sure everyone's okay. I feel like the society and kind of the message that I grew up in, and that a lot of women grew up in that are my age, were make everyone happy, be a good girl, do what you need to do, and please don't upset anybody. Like just don't. So that message can be put into my sport unknowingly, unbeknownst to me. It's the subconscious experience that seeps into everything in life, which is why I would let people beat me, because I didn't want them to be mad at me, and why I would, make sure that I didn't step on any toes in my friend circles, all these things. Same thing with competition. I'd get to the meet and I'd be so afraid to let anybody down. And I'd be so afraid to do something poorly, because what would that mean about me? And I remember being so young thinking all of these things, like, I don't want to upset anybody. I have to do well, because if I don't, that would mean I'm not making somebody happy. Meanwhile, no one's specifically telling me this. Like at that age, that changed in college, but at that age, no one was specifically telling me this. Nobody, not one person was like, I'll be very upset with you. Like not one person. So I had this belief system and had created these stories at a young age that I wasn't going to make people happy if I didn't perform well. So enter the achievement mindset, enter doing more and more and more and more to try and get love and prove yourself. And down the road, that's how it all panned out for a long time.
Also at this time, having qualified for the junior nationals at 13 and all, is the Olympics even in the conversation at this point? Is this something that you have set your sights on, or your parents or your coach have to set their sights on for you, and they're kind of grooming you for this path?
I think yes, but not verbalized. The first time it was verbalized was when I did go to that Gainesville meet, the senior nationals meet, and I didn't do well. But it was that time where it was like, you're good enough to make the Olympic team. And the conversation that my club coach, Mike DeBoer, consistently had with me on a regular basis was, you have to believe that you're good enough to make that Olympic team. And that conversation continued for a long time until I went to college. And then it continued, but it was delivered in a different way. So I went to Olympic trials for the first time before my freshman year of college. And that was in Long Beach, California. And that was when I got, 9th or 10th. So I was like a young buck still. I think I was 16, just turned 17. I was a young college kid too, like young freshman. And that was when I really knew that moment right there was, I know that I can make the 2008 team. And this was 2004 when I realized that, like, I'm good enough. I just don't, there's a lot of mental things and this mind body connection thing started to come in the picture, and it started to become, I would sense when I wasn't confident, I would feel it. And that meet was a big eye-opening experience to me, that in 4 years from now, I could be standing on that podium going to the Olympics. So what do I do? What do I do now?
What are the intangibles? Like if you're placing 9th and yet you want to make the Olympic team, what one have to focus on to bridge that gap?
I think there are a couple of things. One is figuring out what is your story as to why you can't, because I think every single athlete in the history of sports at some point has believed that they can't do it. Like at some point, their internal belief system is, I am not going to be capable of doing this. Even if it's a 20-second conversation with themselves. But there's always that inner gremlin and that little devil that sits on the shoulder that says like, you're not good enough. So I had to address that. And I had to figure out what that was, which took a long time, almost all the way up until the next Olympics. I think obviously from a standpoint of physical, bringing the physical in, you have to understand what your body needs. You have to understand how to train. You have to understand how to recover, not be an asshole and eat shit. And, like you've got to learn how to treat your body like it's this precious vessel that you are going to use and celebrate as something that can get you from point A to point B in the pool, and also win medals if you really want, but feel strong and sturdy and successful. So I had to address that because I had never lifted weights before. This was before college. I was too scared of getting big, which is a whole nother conversation for another day. Don't get me started on that one. But that was another piece. And then I would say the third piece was starting to really figure out who my support system was, how to communicate with them, how to have conversations that were a bit more mature as an athlete, sit down and talk about the hard stuff, take into account, what's going on in your life, communicate it, ask for help when you need help. I didn't know these things then, but I did my best with all three of those. And college was a roller coaster of working through those three things to get to where I needed to be. And I failed at every single one of them numerous times until I got to a point where I could figure out how to keep them all at an equilibrium and check the boxes, but keep them steady and not just done. Keep it steady day by day, one day at a time, 1 month at a time, one meet at a time, and stay on that path. There's a lot that goes into it.
Do you have like any semblance of a normal young person's life? Are you out dating? Are you going out to restaurants with people, your friends, birthday? You're going to go out 20 friends for my birthday? Or is this like a full-time job level pursuit where you're just, no one knows where you are? You're always in the pool. You're always training, or there's something in between? Full-time
pursuit. I also didn't choose in high school to have that kind of life. I think I went to one dance. I had a boyfriend on the high school team. I think we went to 2 movies, or on our club team. The mentality is so different, I think, for maybe teens now than it was then as well. We didn't have the same kinds of stimuli from social media and comparisons and things like that. It existed, but it wasn't the same. So no, I didn't. And when you're in college, you are a unit. Your team is a unit. You date everybody on the team. Those are your people. It's just one big happy family. And that has its pros, it has its cons, but you are in a bubble. And not just swimming, but the athletic community in general. So, my suite mates were Joe, Kim, Noah, and Al Horford.
Wow.
It's just so funny to think about, they're like literally 2 doors down the hall, and we all share the same common room, and we're freshmen. They weren't who they are now, that we didn't know any of these things, but this is the life. You are in a pod of people, you're quarantined. You wake up, you go to practice, you go to school, you go to practice, you go to training center, you go to dinner, you go to bed. That's it. Day after day. You party Saturday night. This is college I'm talking about, obviously. I didn't party at all in high school. I didn't even know. I was too afraid. But that's your unit.
And what's the mental health situation like at this point?
In college? Not great for me. My college years were extremely tough, and I put on a happy face, but they were tough for me. There were a lot of different variables that went down, from relationships to coaching relationships, to sickness, illness, eating disorder, behavior. I had an incredible academic advisor who at the time served as a counselor for all of us. The conversation of mental health was nowhere to be found except for with him. He was ahead of the times. You know, this 2005 to 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you can also remember, you know, this conversation wasn't prevalent. You can talk about it, but the tangible tools and understanding how to actually make the changes was not in the conversation.
Right.
So I battled deeply, and I had a very difficult time with my self-confidence, with my body, with emotional abusive relationships, with other abusive relationships. And it was all over my head because I was like, oh, this is normal. If I'm just having a hard time, I just need to go talk to Tim, suck it up, you know, and move forward the next day. And I did. But you know, until I took a radical responsibility for what I needed to change and how I needed to structure my life there, I really was playing this victim role and didn't know how to do anything. And that was like around sophomore year, where it was just like complete depression. I was sick the whole time. I had lost a lot of weight. Had a very difficult time with a lot of other situations that I spent probably half the year crying or figuring out, you know, I don't say that lightly. I think back to it and I'm like, oh, if I could have just given this girl a hug and actually sat down with her and understood what was going on, because I didn't have any of the tools, any of the language, any understanding of what I was experiencing, other than whatever it is weak and you need to get over it. And you need to move forward.
And meantime, there's this buildup. The Olympics are coming. The Olympics are about to happen, right? And you'd already qualified, I believe, at this point for the 2008. How early do you qualify for the Olympics? A year before?
No, actually, we didn't qualify until the summer after my senior year. So
okay,
that was swimming is interesting. You qualify and then you go straight there.
Wow.
You don't have a break.
Like literally, like a couple of weeks later, you're at the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So we packed our bags for trials as if you could make it and you're never coming back, basically, for like 2 months.
So you graduated first and then you went to the Olympics? I
did not graduate until I had a semester left because I took a lot of time off that summer to train for the trials. So I had a semester left after the Olympics.
Right. Yeah. So on the surface, you're like showing up, you're smiling, you're there, you're committed, you're competing, but in the background, you're crying and feeling depressed and everything that comes with that.
Yeah. And I didn't have, like I said, I didn't have the language to share or to explain what was going on. Mm-hmm. I felt everything. It was like everything felt sticky and uncomfortable, and like I was wading through molasses all the time, and I didn't know how to articulate myself with what I was experiencing. And if I did, I was too afraid to. I didn't know how to do that. And I think we had incredible seniors on our team that would sit and talk with me, and when I was younger, and I remember getting to be a senior and being like, now I'm the one that's supposed to be the role model for everybody, and I'm having a hard time. And so then you enter that territory of, well, I can't possibly be struggling. I'm the one that has to be sharing the positivity.
Right.
So I really did put my blinders on and did the best that I could. And looking back, I do wonder, and this is kind of why I've dedicated my life from then until now to what I do, because I would have actually had the tools to understand how to regulate myself and to understand how to work through difficult times and take radical responsibility for how I feel and move forward in a way that felt productive. Like, how much better could I have been? And that's the other conversation that, you can do the what ifs for days, but that really struck me as there has to be a better way. to understand what athletes go through, from pressures of performance to personal relationships, to coaching relationships, to nutrition and body image and the conversation around that, especially swimmers and gymnasts and people in no clothes. These types of conversations are real. It's real. And I think what happens when we don't have the tools and the language to articulate it is we fall victim to these scenarios because we don't know how to process them. So it's just like, this is all happening to me and I don't know what to do. And so I'm going to give up. And our first instinct as humans is we either, you go in fight or flight and you overcorrect everything, or you shut down. And so I got really good at shutting down and tuning into what I needed to do. So I was able to make the Olympic team and do all these things because I could shut down all the pain that I was experiencing. Didn't deal with it. That didn't work, by the way, but it worked in the moment. It worked for me to get to where I needed to be. So not having those tools to understand how to work through that was a detriment in the long run. And it also could have helped me regulate my system and my nervous system and my ability to perform a lot better if I would have known how to do that, which I think is still an evolving conversation to this day. It's like, here's the issue. Now what do we do about it?
Right. And even the academic advisor, he didn't kind of tell you, hey, everybody's going through this. You're not the only one.
He did. He was awesome. He was awesome. I think the disconnect there is that, there's only so much he can do. It's like, he has his boundaries he has to keep as an academic advisor. And so there's only so much that you can get out of people in that environment, especially as a young woman with older men that are basically, I didn't have any, I had one female coach, so I didn't really know who to trust and who to confide in at the time with the things that I was personally going through as a young woman.
Talk about your discovery of visualization and how that transformed your approach to your swimming.
It was actually a brilliant discovery because it was something that came naturally to me. It started in high school with the coach that I told you was the best coach I've ever had. We used to do visualization exercises that we all scoffed at, laughed and thought it was silly and dumb. And, this is like 1999 or something, and we're all laying on the floor of the team room at the pool, and he's turning on these tape cassettes and we're listening to goal setting and visualization. And I remember thinking it was silly, but for some reason I felt very connected to the process of that. Fast forward, in college, when we started to have, this is about my junior year, when we started to have more mature conversations about how to perform optimally. And we'd have individual one-on-one conversations with our specialty coach. So there's, 5 coaches on staff and you have like a specialty coach for your specific area. I remember the conversation between us was, in a nutshell, you don't understand times or stats. And I said, yes, that's me. I don't operate that way. So let's use visuals. Let's use markers. Let's use images. I said, all right, I'm game. Let's do it. So from that day on, what we did was, instead of applying it in a way that would be more of a meditative sitting down and visualizing, my first experience with visualization was actually during practices. So we'd go into our specialty groups and, you kind of have like 4 people over here, 4 people over here. And we do different sets that were, catered to our events. And the instructions that were given to me started to become, all right, Caroline, Haley Pearsall, this person is 2 legs ahead of you. All you see is whitewash. That means like kick, like you're behind, or, and I want you to roll on the turn, like tumbleweed, like he would start saying things that would be images for me, or like, I want you to snowball this, which means like, as it gets bigger, the snowball gets bigger, you get faster, different things like that. He'd give me tempo talk. So he'd talk about my tempo and it's a pendulum. Okay. Pendulum's getting faster. I was able to perform with these types of images. And all of a sudden I'm, 18 years old. And I'm like, wait a minute, I finally understand myself as an athlete. And I think this is going to help me. And so I utilized that for the remainder of my senior year. And that was my first real experience of that, was actually a application and not just a sit and think about it. It was an application physically. So I became so connected to the physical experience of the visualization.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a game changer for me. And I think it clicked that it was okay that I was the way I was. It was okay that I was a feeler. It was okay that I thought about images and visualization. And it worked. It was okay. And that moment, I think, was a big catalyst to the rest of my success in making the Olympic team, because I was able to visualize what was going on instead of just trying to think of it in this linear fashion that I was supposed to think about it in. Yeah.
And you ended up on the team with Michael Phelps. You ended up medaling at that Beijing Olympics. I think a lot of us can imagine what that must be like leading up to an event of such magnitude. But what is it like after the Olympics, after you come home? Because you retired yourself from competitive sports not long after that. So something apparently went down. So talk a little bit about that moment in time.
I was listening to the Jewel podcast with Joe Rogan. This is actually one that I did listen to. I listened to over a span of a couple of days on a couple walks with my new little puppy. And she said something that struck me, finally made sense to me as far as why I retired, quote unquote, from swimming. I never wanted to be this one trick pony in my mind. Not that people that specialize in sport are that. I'm not saying that at all. I just didn't want that to be my only existence. And I think from such a young age, backtracking and rewinding to my childhood, where I did feel this sense of acceptance and experience and feel and understanding that sport is an art for me, that swimming was an art. My motivation wasn't to continue to climb that ladder and continue to succeed in that way. I had this wake-up call. I obviously went through a really difficult time in my career, especially when I left Florida. There was a lot of very rough things going on at the pro team that I trained at with the coach. I remember retiring and just knowing that I have no idea what I'm going to do. I don't really know what's next, but I know that I'm not going to be happy chasing this exact thing over and over and over again. And knowing that the result will feel the exact same way it felt when I was standing on the podium in Beijing. And that was just what I thought at the time. Maybe it wouldn't have. The experience could have been different. But to me, it was like that feeling standing on the podium, that feeling of winning, that feeling of, I just won. This is freaking amazing. Oh my God. It's fleeting. It lasts a day. And even at that, I remember I used to have family and friends frustrated at me because I didn't want to talk about it. So when I put all these pieces of the puzzle together and I realized that the result will continue to yield the same feelings, that this isn't what it's all about. There has to be a different meaning to life, to sport, to experience that I haven't even seen yet. And this is just a platform. I was like, all right, let's do this. It was not pretty because that was my relationship for 25 years of my life, but it was extremely necessary. for me to grow and evolve. And I was so interested in evolution of that. I was so interested in evolving myself as a human being because I knew I didn't know it all. I knew I didn't have every tool that I was capable of having in my tool belt. And I didn't want to wake up in another 10 years and say, well, what if I would have done that? What if I would have done that? I was completely okay with what I had accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard. It was not easy. I cried. And I went through several years of very depressed and difficult emotions. With
And when
a
you
lot of
say
layers.
very depressed, what are we talking about on the spectrum of depression? Were you having suicidal ideations? Were there like nights where you had to call hotlines and stuff like that?
Absolutely. The hotline stuff came later. That came a long time after. But the initial retirement phase, retirement, such a funny word for athletes. Like, I'm retired, I'm 25, you know.
Well, you graduated yourself from
I transitioned.
Competing. Yeah,
I transitioned. And the first, I want to say from 2010 to 2015, 16 were the overcompensation. How can I prove myself? How can I do what I did and get that same high? How can I chase that same feeling? Who's going to notice me now? How can I find it? And simultaneously, I'm like, how can I hide? How can I make sure nobody sees that I'm not achieving what I achieve? Oh no, now I'm failing. So what I do, I chased everything possible. I did 1 million running races. I went to 2 different graduate programs. I finished them both. I loved it. You know, they're all part of my life now, but there was a pivotal moment at the end of my last graduate program where my instructor or my teacher professor looked at me and said, stop collecting things and start doing and living and being. And she was a very spiritual professor. Like she was, you know, and I was like, was so offended. I was like, what do you mean? Everyone's been so proud of me. That's what people have said to me. You know, like, I'm so proud of you for going to do this and getting that degree and doing it. It was, the conversation was rarely around like, how are you really? How is your experience there really? Not what are you doing? How much have you achieved and done?
Did you ever feel like swimming was like your life's purpose? And if not, did you have any idea what that could have been at that point in your life?
No, it definitely wasn't my life's purpose. And I knew that from a young age. I didn't know what it was. I knew, and this is such an interesting topic here, because I think something that has brought me a lot of shame, and I talked to Salema about this at one point, actually, is that I'm a polymath. I have a lot of things I could do and that I want to do. And that is a bit frowned upon and can be in society back then. If you don't go get the degree, get the job, the 9 to 5, where you succeed and do that thing. And I still have moments of that. I still don't feel understood. And I actually still feel that if I had something more understood about what I do, that would be more acceptable in society. And I know you and I have had this conversation personally as well. So I finished not knowing what my purpose was or what I was supposed to do. And that's a very common feeling for a lot of athletes, because I think what a lot of athletes experience is that you're really good at what you do because it comes to you in a very natural way. And then to find something that comes to you in a very natural way again can be difficult. And if it comes to you in a natural way and it's not what society deems as successful, then that causes some problems for whether it's family or friends or whatever it is. People, what do you mean you're going to go be an artist? Or what do you mean you're going to design clothes? Or what do you mean, you know, is that going to make money? And so I started doubting myself. And those doubts.
what was the takeaway from the whole, like when you look at the body of your body of work as a swimmer leading up to the Olympics, and then you transitioning out of that to this next stage in your life, which essentially is like a rebirthing? What was a positive takeaway from the, because you described some kind of experiences, like maybe insecurities and all this, but what was something from that body of work that you thought, okay, I could really apply this to helping people or finding something that feels more aligned or something like that, aside from like the hard work stuff? Because I think that's kind of a common thing. Were there any intangibles?
I was very curious.
Maybe not hiding my feelings this time, I'm going to just be transparent,
I was very curious as to why and how different people operated. So I think when I was in the sport of swimming, I took very close note at how every athlete operated. Certain ones operate this way, other ones operate this way. There's type A's, there's out in the clouds, there's so many different styles, personality styles. And I was very connected empathically to that experience with a lot of my peers. And so that turned into this passion for understanding why and how we can all achieve a similar goal doing it differently. And I honestly think that that's been a big driver for a lot of my life, is how can we figure out how to do things our own way, and whatever result that yields is your own result and your own success. And just because Sally or Joe don't do it that way and they yield a result or success doesn't mean that you're not successful. And that's been an extremely challenging thing to learn. But I do think that that's one of the biggest lessons that I have taken, was just feeling so empathically my peers and how everyone has done something differently, and be able to apply that to my life now, and to understand how to accept that better, that not everyone's going to fit in the same box. Not everyone's going to do something the way you want them to do it. Not everyone is going to have this path the way I want them to have it, And so it checks me. I have to check myself there. I have to check my biases. I have to check my preconceived conditioning. And I would hope that I can create that. And that's kind of what we've created with our business, is that there's just so many different ways to, there goes my little dog. There's so many different ways to do that. That was the biggest thing, I think, for me. It was never about the actual thing. It was about something else every time.
Well, in a way, it's still a carryover from your childhood days when you were doing the same thing on the playground, except maybe you didn't have the language for it at the time, and maybe you didn't see the importance of experiencing all sides of it so that you could be of service to other people, to younger people who don't have those tools, and so you get an opportunity to give them those tools. But leading up to that, to what you're doing now, there's this bit of a montage of, you recognizing that you're in a dorsal state, your body's really off. You have to repair that. You have to basically find yourself again, which is really bizarre, because again, from the outside looking in, you think, okay, someone who's been to the Olympics, they are the most focused, the most hardworking, they are the most successful. And that's not what's happening behind the scenes after the fact. So you kind of have to rebuild, take all the Legos apart and then reconstruct yourself again in a completely different identity. So what were some of the milestones along that path of reconstruction?
So I moved out here. First of all, I've lived in way too many places. And you might be laughing because you're like, no, not as many as me. But I moved out here, and my whole mission was, okay, put your feet in the ground. You've been running. You've been in fight or flight. You've been trying your hardest to find who you are as a human being, and put your feet in the ground. Let's establish something. let's establish a little community. You've lived in 6 places so far since you've left. You don't seem happy anywhere, you know? And right before quarantine, I hit this very dark space. And this was 2019.
Mm-hmm.
I got concussed. And the classic saying, you got to hit yourself over the head to realize something, was the most true comment I've ever experienced. And it was this moment of, oh my God, I really have to make some life changes here. Because I had lived running. I had been struggling with food. I wasn't fueling myself. I didn't feel worthy. I couldn't open up in relationships. I was shut down. My body was shut down completely. I wasn't opening myself to any experiences. So I hit myself over the head. I mean, I cracked my skull open, and it was the first time in my life when I couldn't even formulate a sentence or have a conversation with somebody. Literally, when you get concussed, it's very difficult. And it was through that time that I got reconnected with my art, that I started to come into my body more, since I couldn't intellectualize things like society wanted me to try and do for the past 5 years, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And all these things that felt natural to me as a swimmer started to come back a little bit. And everything came up. It was like my skull and my brain were shaken, and everything came up, everything in my life, every abusive situation, depression, darkness that I experienced in swimming and after. It was like just volcanic eruption, and I could hardly control it. Like I was afraid I was broken. Like something was extremely wrong with me. I wasn't able to have, I wasn't able to actually focus on who I was. I wasn't able to focus on work. I wasn't able to do anything really. And I felt like, this is it. Like I'm a problem. And sorry about her.
That's your dog.
If you can hear that, she just woke up.
Yeah.
I started to have episodes that were extremely difficult for me. This was like 2019. This was right before quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I would be in full panic, like sobbing. I would go sit in a corner. And I had experiences in my career that were far from okay, that involved other people and substance abuse and different things that I was reliving. And I was like, where the hell is this coming from? I was terrified. These were the moments I would call the hotline. I needed somebody to talk to at midnight. I didn't know what to do. I was completely destroyed inside, and I would be curled up in a ball with a blanket over my head, just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. Like, who am I? What is the point of all this? Like, what am I doing here? There's no point. Like, I'm not successful like I was. Like, is this, is our business going to work? I didn't know how to operate in society. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I would hide. I would stay. I quarantined far before the quarantine happened. And it's so hard to explain because it's such a visceral experience of what this feels like. And it was essentially what one would call a mental health crisis. I mean, I was in a very dark place. And so that's when I started to seek help in a way that was different than I had before. I had been in therapy and I had done coping mechanisms per se, but I had never actually dealt with the things and dug them up and healed them. Mm-hmm. So I sought help and seeked out help and found a somatic experiencing practitioner and started doing some very deep work. EMDR, like lots of like recalling past events and working through them. And it was gnarly. It was gnarly. And before quarantine, obviously, when you have in-person sessions, there would be days when I couldn't like let her near me. And, you know, I was so, I was boiling inside. That took about 2 years to get through. So like right when quarantine hit, right about the beginning to the middle was when it started to really make sense. And I think that last stretch of it was when I really healed a lot of the things that I went through. And I isolated myself. I tell you what, people were like, where is she? What is she doing? What's wrong with her? She hasn't come home. She's not talking to us. Like, you know, and I couldn't bring up what I was going through. Like I couldn't see out of my own two eyes and ears and brain. Like I was stuck, so incredibly stuck. And to talk about it would bring it all up even more. And I was already doing that.
I have a question for
layers.
someone.
Layers on layers there.
For someone who may be experiencing something similar, right? What is a hotline experience like? And was there anything specifically helpful that you found when you would call that would help kind of get you off the ledge?
First of all, it's terrifying to call.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of times I actually almost didn't, and then ended up putting my phone down and calling a friend instead, which is also wonderful. But when I called the hotline, it was finally a time when I could take radical responsibility for myself. And it felt like it was someone wasn't going to save me, because I couldn't be, I could hurt to this person and they don't know me, but I couldn't be a victim to my own lack of accountability. Like they hold you accountable. This person, I had a woman every time somehow that answered the phone. And every time she answered the phone, it was this like this experience where they don't know anything about you, but they're not going to let anything happen to you in a way that's this, you know, when you share something with a stranger, sometimes it has a different effect, right? Because they don't know what you've gone through. They don't know you. But when they say something, you're just like, I haven't heard that before. I haven't heard this angle before. And in a lot of those moments, I couldn't understand or articulate what I was even experiencing. I would just cry. And I tend to go to corners or bathrooms whenever I'm hurting. Like I'll sit on the floor in a corner in a bathroom, and I spend a lot of time in the corners of bathrooms talking to, because it's a long story about why, but talking on the phone. And long story short, it's a very terrifying experience, but it holds you accountable in a way that you feel seen, held, understood, and they check in on you and they allow you to be who you are. And you don't even have to see this person ever again. It's like you don't have to feel like you prove anything to them. Like, I'm fine. It's fine. I'm fine. You know, sometimes that can be the message that I would give my friends. And this woman wouldn't allow me off the hook every time, or the person that I talked to, like, you're not fine. Let's talk about it, you know? But I think when you have people close to you in your life, you don't want them to worry about you as much. So that my tendency personally, and this is just my experience, perhaps others can relate to this, is that I'm fine. Everything's fine. No, it's okay. You don't want to share some things because you don't want them to worry about you. I didn't want my brother and my family to worry about me. I never shared any of this stuff with them. And so for some reason, opening up to someone that doesn't know me felt safe because I didn't have to prove myself, which was the whole thing I had to work through in the first place. But it's a blessing. It's there. It's a blessing that it's available. You can also text them. Takes longer, but it felt scary but safe for me. And so many layers to it all that are impossible to share in such a short time. But I think, you know, I always feel so deeply for those that are suffering and struggling and having a really difficult time, because the internal message is I'm broken. I'm worthless. I don't have a reason to be here. I don't, you're so wrapped up in your own mind and in your own experience, and you forget the things that you do well and the person you are to other people. And it's a spiral. It's a spiral that's hard to get out of. And that doesn't mean you're broken. It just means that you're finally really, in my opinion, I think a lot of people should know that when you're in those moments, you're probably on the brink of something pretty spectacular if you can just continue to move this energy out of your body and through it, and talk to people, ask for help, like work through it in a way that is, I am not helpless. I am not broken. I am having a really hard time with whatever it is, addiction or depression or whatever it is. Those moments, those pivotal, chaotic moments can actually be hugely informational when you look at them in hindsight. It's hard to see that in the moment, but it's a feeling.
So how would you articulate your mission these days?
These are always hard questions for me. You would. I want to, and my work mission and my personal mission are very similar. Mm-hmm. I want to assist human beings to understand the way they operate, and that allow them to tap into how they feel and use that as information. Because our bodies hold a lot of that information. A lot of athletes are afraid to feel, or if they feel, they push it down because that means they're weak. But my mission is to allow ourselves to understand how we can utilize feelings as information. It's not something to shame or get trapped in, but it's something to utilize and bring to the surface so we can identify what we need to take responsibility for, what things we can change in our lives, and what things we can learn how to let go of and walk away from if we need to.
And I think that's one of the telltale signs of someone who has indeed found their purpose, is that their personal mission and their work mission are aligned. And so that obviously was the mission behind Rise as well, right? To work with younger athletes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we also wanted to provide a space for these Olympic and pro athletes to give back, because the message when we were done was like, what do? We don't want to be coaches. Mm-hmm. Sure, a lot of them are. That's great. But most of them are like, I don't want to coach. Like, tell me what to do, And so we created this business because a lot of them want to work with athletes. They want to work on their mindsets, want to help them understand themselves a lot better as athletes. And, obviously we saw it this summer at the Olympics. We've seen it over and over again. If we can instill this at a foundational level, everything will get better. And that is across the board in society right now. If it can be instilled at a foundational level, if we can understand human beings better and help them understand themselves, like what a difference they can make in the world with others, with themselves, with their sports, with their careers, with their purpose. And what better way to do that than through experiential learning itself? I think we have enough information in this world and not enough actual connection about the things that truly matter deep down. That was the goal. There's a better way. There's a better way to do this, and we're going to make it, because what's the saying? If you don't find something that's not there, you better create it.
Right.
So that's what we did. And we just thought, like, that's how we're going to do this.
So if you're a swim coach, a junior high or high school swim coach in Mississippi or somewhere like in the middle of nowhere, they're on a flight with you, sitting next to you, what words of wisdom would you offer to them for the young people on their team to kind of help them have a better experience in their athletic career?
Trust yourself. Put your blinders on. That's a big one, because the comparison thing is very real.
Wait, no, are you talking to the athletes
Are
or
you
to the
saying to the
coach?
athletes
No,
or
to
to
the
the coach?
coach. Like this
Oh,
coach is like,
goodness.
hey, you've been down this whole track. What can I do to help support
Mm.
my kids, my athletes in a way that doesn't lead to some of the things you experienced?
Tricky part about coaches in high school and club is they have 100 athletes. And so when they ask this question, the hardest part is saying, listen and sit down and talk to them individually, because that's a really hard thing for them to do. So the thing I always go back to is that accept how each athlete is and how they operate. It doesn't mean they're not going to be successful, but start to, as a coach, become tuned into the clues of the different styles of how everybody works. Not everybody will do things the way that one person does them. Not everybody will do things the way that you want them to do them. You can learn from the athletes. So how Sally succeeds, pay attention to that. What is she doing that Sandra isn't? And how can you learn from both of these people? I think coaches can learn just as much from their athletes as athletes can learn from coaches.
Beautiful. And how are you personally defining success these days?
This girl's up on the table.
Oh.
Cut. I am personally defining success. That's a great question, because I still battle the what can I do to make sure that I am succeeding in the way the world wants me to succeed, and how can I show it on social media, and how can I make sure that everybody sees what I'm doing, and started to sort of put that down. And I succeed and I view success on the way I feel. I can tell in my body when I'm anxious. I can tell in my body when I'm not feeling complete and whole, when I guard and restrict. When I feel fluid with what's happening in my life, that to me is success. That's when things and manifestations open up. That's when things come to me, because I'm open to receive them. And I can receive, that is when I am successful. When I am blocked and restricted and tense and unable to receive, closed off, that's when I'm not. I clearly must be receiving if she's jumping on me right now.
Well, I think if I was God and I was going to design someone to help young people understand high pressure situations, I would create someone and put them in all sides of that situation, the highs, the lows, every aspect of it, so that they can be the most relatable person to these younger people who are embarking upon this path. So
it's an awareness. It's just awareness. It's becoming aware of what's going on.
And it started very young. It's like you're kind of destined to go through all of the things you've been through. And I mean, your parents are both professional athletes, and this beautiful pool is down the street, and you kind of had to. I tell people sometimes, when I was a kid, I was actually, this is one of the experiences that probably stopped me from pursuing sports. I was playing recreational baseball with my brother and some other friends just at the elementary school across the street after school one day, and I was playing catcher and he was at bat. He swung the bat and let it go, and it hit me right on the third eye, right on the middle of the forehead. And it was,
how fitting.
Yeah, exactly. But, looking back now, obviously it wasn't pleasant at the time, but looking back now, I was like, oh yeah, maybe God and me and God got together and decided, okay, I want to open up my third eye, but I don't want to go through all the, all this meditation. I want to get it over with right away. So let's just take care of it when I'm 8 years old.
Just knock you right in the head. Yeah. You woke up too. We both had a similar awakening at different ages. Well, that's interesting. I do think that's a very, very observant thing of you.
I think the way it's stuff is designed is definitely there's some divine timing happening there. So anyway, I want to acknowledge you for continuing to keep putting one foot in front of the other in an effort to just be of service, because that in and of itself is a very difficult thing to do, to get out of your own way long enough to use your experience to help other people and inspire other people in unconventional ways. So so thanks for making those calls to the hotline every other night when you had to, and doing whatever you had to do to stay locatable so that we can continue to learn from you and your experience.
Well, thank you. I think I'm just striving to continue to feel my way through that and release the need and the pressure to intellectualize my experience and force explaining it like in a way that's proving. It can be a difficult thing to do when you want to help others, but also they have to learn how to help themselves too. So I think leading by example, which you do a fantastic job of, just leading by example and trying to just be who you are. And that is enough. And that presence will be felt. It's a big goal of mine, is I do not want to turn into a robot of what the world wants me to be. I just want to be able to experience life in a way that allows me to be of service through others, through example and through feel. Experience.
And you're doing it, and you're helping to change the conversation around mental health and sports and just mental health in general, which I think I try to encourage as many people as possible to talk more about it. And so thank you for that. Thank you for your transparency, your vulnerability, and your enthusiasm around this conversation becoming more and more widespread.
Yeah, it's an important one. I think we're all still figuring out what it exactly means in many ways, but it's a very important one, and I'm excited to see it evolve.
And I'm looking forward to swimming with you in the ocean one of these days.
Yeah, we got to do that. There's been more and more sharks out there, though. I'm not going to lie. But
have you seen them?
Seen a lot of videos of them right in our area. I have not
the
personally
drone videos and stuff of you guys out there open water swimming and sharks right next to you.
That's Adam Skolnick. You've probably seen some of those.
Yeah.
I was talking to him at Rich's birthday dinner recently, and he was like, "Oh yeah, there's no big deal." I'm like, "No big deal." What do you mean? I need that level of bravery. Pretty impressive. I'll get there someday, but we'll go out there where there's no sharks. We'll make sure.
Yeah, we'll do it. I don't care. Whatever. This makes for a better story, right?
They're not looking for us.
By a shark.
Yeah,
right.
They're not looking for us. It's their playground. We're just guests in it. I keep reminding myself that it's not my home. It's theirs. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes. See you soon.